for all of your support. And this evening, I won't be talking too long, as I'd like Kate and Kerry to have the opportunity to share their experiences from their time playing hockey at the highest level, and even at times leading up to that. I'd like to just ask a few questions as well, but I just want to give you a bit of a brief update on our goals and how you can get involved. Now, since the last webinar, we've been overwhelmed by the response, the number of people, the clubs, the brands. They've all signed up and supported and wanted to get involved with All In. So a massive thank you to you all. And if you're finding out about All In for the first time, I'll put in a link to the previous webinar in the chat, where we talk a lot more about our goals throughout the presentation. And yesterday I was actually lucky enough to present our vision to the Great Britain women's hockey squad and talk through what we want to do. And a big thank you to Emily Defrand for setting that up. And I think it speaks volumes that there are more current international players who want to at least hear about what we're doing. And I hope that we do see more of them signing up going forward. And I just want to offer my thanks once again for everyone who's supported so far. And this evening, I'm just going to start with a bit of a brief as to what All In is and how you can all get involved. So I'm just going to share my screen. So All In, what does it represent? And this is something I'm really keen to stress, that if you're committed to stopping inequality in hockey, ask yourself what you've done to diminish the structure of inequality. You either commit to it, or by doing nothing, you reaffirm it. And what we've been trying to get across is there isn't an approach of dipping your toes in. You're either in or you're out. And we set up 3 A's: acknowledge, assess, and act. Now, this can apply to you as a person, a club, a region, or a governing body. And if you see inequality, call it out and acknowledge it. Assess what problems there may be and what can be done to help towards solving it, and then act on it. And here's our vision for a more inclusive and diverse future for hockey. We want to see an actively promoted national strategy for promoting the sport within state schools, an active education programme for regions, clubs, umpires and players on D&I on the same scale as safeguarding. We want to see national coaches engaging and mentoring clubs from more deprived towns and inner city areas. By 2023, we'd like to see the EH Board of Directors matching the demographics of our society. And by 2028, we'd like to see the Olympic squad match the demographics of our society, and 50% of the GB 2028 squad coming from state schools, and the national coaching setup as well to match the demographics of society by 2028. And again, just how you can get involved: get your club to sign up to the All In mission. The website's below, hockeyallin.co.uk. Follow us on Twitter. Join our WhatsApp group conversation if you want. There's an opt-in when you sign up on the website. Write to your local region and the governing body, encouraging them to sign up. Socialise the vision, which a lot of you have been doing, sharing our logo on social media, which has been brilliant. Share the logo as much as you can. And then if you want, you can buy a t-shirt, which I'm modelling not very well tonight. And we've also got stickers and face masks, and I'll send a link to everyone for that tonight, because the website's just gone live for where you can buy those directly. And there's 2 people here tonight who've joined us that I don't really need to introduce: Kate Richardson Walsh and Kerry Williams. Obviously, Kate has captained GB to a gold in the Olympics in Rio, and Kerry's won a number of caps for GB and represented the country in major tournaments, and is now going on and doing major, amazing things at Nike. And I'll start with Kate. And Kate, I just wanted to ask you, what is it about not just the all in movement, but speaking out on diversity and inclusion in the sport that has made you want to be so vocal on this topic?
Thanks, Germesh. Thanks for that lovely introduction. I was nodding away to all of it. So I first saw Hockey All In, I think, through Emily DeFrond, I think, posting it on Twitter in the lead up to that webinar. And I saw the title and I saw the logo and I was like, right, sign me up. Because I have gone on a massive journey and I'm still on that journey. But it was everything that I want hockey to be, and I believe hockey can be. So I was delighted when you got in touch with me and asked me if I come on. And I guess my experience, I'm going to take you all the way back to me being and it's many moons ago because I'm an old granny now. But I grew up in Manchester. I went to my local state school with my sister, and that's the first time I picked up a hockey stick in PE lessons and played on a god-awful red gra with god-awful sticks, and that was my introduction to the game. Now, I had a PE teacher who was a total hockey fanatic, and my parents were both PE teachers and loved sport, and my mum played hockey and coached a little bit in the system, so she knew the system. So already my privilege was showing up for me there. And I suppose when I look back to being that youngster, I feel like I was on like the conveyor belt of life, but that now I can see retrospectively and in hindsight that I was on a conveyor belt of life that was afforded to me because I am able-bodied, white, middle class, cisgendered, at the time heterosexual, and so that was giving me lots of opportunities. And Kerry put it brilliantly last night when we were having a chat about, I was very much in my lane. I was totally blinkered to anybody else's experience. I was assuming wrongly that everybody was experiencing life and experiencing hockey in the same way that I was. And, to be honest, was completely unaware of really any inequality, even sexism that I was experiencing. And now I'm kind of talking about, into my 20s. And to be honest, it wasn't really until I started my relationship with Helen, since 2008, that for the very first time I experienced a little bit of being othered. Now, again, we had a brilliant conversation last night. In women's hockey, being lesbian or gay or even bisexual is not necessarily taboo. It is something that's talked about, and so is a safe space and feels somewhat comfortable. I guess being outside of that, just stepping outside of that from time to time, felt a lot less comfortable as somebody that was now in a same-sex relationship. And I think from that experience, it kind of, I don't know if it forced me, but it started, I'm going to say awakening, but it started me to start seeing, right, hold on a minute, I am experiencing other forms of discrimination here. I'm experiencing sexism. And I remember some brilliant conversations in that London squad that we had, Kerry, with the association and with various people about things that as a women's squad we would feel were unequal and frankly wrong in terms of gender, and only gender. And it wasn't again until after 2012 when we went to Forest Flyers, we went to the Waltham Forest Hockey Club, very first inclusive club for disability and disadvantaged kids in Waltham Forest. And again, it was the first time that I had experienced young people with disabilities, a whole range of disabilities, playing hockey, having fun, loving it. And it reminded me of why I love this sport. It reminded me of what I play this sport for and what I actually want this sport to be, but what it absolutely was not and still is not. I was going into schools and talking, and hockey's great and hockey's for everybody. And I think that for the first time I was like, it's not. It's absolutely not. and we're discriminating against lots of people. Now, I have to be really honest with you, it wasn't until the murder of George Floyd last summer, like lots of white people really forced me to hold up the mirror and look at racism and look at my racism and look at my privilege that I've experienced as a white person and how that's afforded me opportunities and not put barriers in my way, and how it has absolutely discriminated against and put barriers in the way for lots of people of colour in this country. And when I think about diversity, that's why I love the Hockey All In logo. When I see it's all of it. When you're talking about diversity, for me, it's got to be about across the board. We've got to talk about it all, because it's all important, because it's about everybody. And that's really what I want this sport to be. I look back, I think I fell into the trap of following and believing the stories that I was being told, that sport was good and the people in sport are good, and sport, can do all these. Sport can be good, and people in sport can be good, but it's not automatically that way. And so when you approached me, Gomez, to talk about this, I was like, yeah, I can talk about my sexuality, I can talk about the discrimination I've faced in that sense, and I can talk about gender and how I've experienced it in that sense. I can talk about the work that I do with Access Sport and disability hockey, but I can't talk about what it is to experience racial discrimination. I can't talk about that in any way. I need to listen. I need to do the work, and I need to listen to other people. So immediately, having had amazing conversations with Kerry last year, who was brilliant and open and talking to me about that, I thought, right, immediately I'm going to contact Kerry and say, okay, I'll go on this webinar, but only if Kerry will come on with me and be open and share her experiences, because I think we all need to hear them, we need to listen to them, we need to understand them, and we need to move forward and act upon them. So I'm really, really looking forward to Kez.
When you talked about discrimination and in particular racism, was it last year that was the actual first time that you actually had those conversations with anyone in the game about it?
Yeah. I mean, there's probably, looking back, there's probably times when, probably particularly on the men's side, I've thought about players. I'm not going to talk about any specific name, I'm not going to name them, but there have been players of colour on the men's side, and I have, I think, wondered about what their experience has been, because I don't think it was the same as everybody else, but I don't know if that was based on what that was based upon. So I probably didn't think about it in that detail and consider racism in that way.
What made you think that it wasn't the same as everybody else? There must have been something.
Yeah, I just think, really good question, Gomez. I think they felt, to me, they looked like they were on the outside. Now I'm saying that knowing that I've played in a team with Kerry, and I don't want to at all tell Kerry's story, but not having any appreciation that Kerry might have been experiencing something very similar, if not the same, and I'm playing in a team with her. So I like lots of people, I've been blind to it, to racism, my culpability in being blind to it, and my need to be open to it and to do something about it and break down those systems.
And Kerry, I'm just going to bring you in. Obviously, Kate had asked you to come along onto this webinar today. Yep. What made you want to get involved? Because I know that you took a break from the game for quite a while.
Yeah, I think the big word that keeps coming out in both of what both of you said is the word opportunity. And I think I genuinely haven't had the opportunity to be able to have these deep conversations with my teammates or with anybody until the Black Lives Matter movement this year. The reason I stepped away from the game is because I was just extremely tired and frustrated. I think when you're a minority within the sport, you carry a big weight on your shoulders, because you're not just representing yourself or your family name, you're representing an entire population of people. You might be, I was always very conscious from a really early age that I was probably the first interaction that people had with someone of color. And so I had to make sure that I was, it was almost like perfect in how I approach things. So I learned from a very young age from my dad. My dad is Antiguan. He taught us from a young age how to almost like disarm people. So because you can't hide your color, you can hide your sexuality, you can hide disabilities, you can hide certain things, but like you just can't hide. I can't hide the fact that I'm half Caribbean. I'm extremely proud. I'm so proud of both sides of both cultures that I have within me.
Sorry, just to mention there, you're originally from Leicester. And
yeah.
I mean, I went to Leicester University. I know how multicultural it is.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have been necessarily the first. It wouldn't have been the first interaction with a person of colour in Leicester, would it? It would have probably been outside of Leicester, or
well, within the hockey circle, like Leicester Hockey and the club. I've always felt really central within the club. I mean, I've loved them dearly. Like I played for like 22 years of my life at Leicester. The women there like raised me, and my teammates are like my best friends now. But the club, they acknowledge this. They don't reflect the city, and they're really working hard to try and change that. There is a high population of public school, players. I was state school educated my whole life. I'm in a complete anomaly. So I was state school educated. I found hockey through a club because my best friend played sport, and her parents took me to this club, and I loved it. I didn't actually. My aspiration as a young child was to go to the Olympics, and the reason that hockey became the path was because the only sport that I realized that it didn't matter what body shape you were, it didn't matter if you were athletic or not, you could be any type of player. And when we talk about diversity and inclusion, there isn't any other Olympic sport that people can turn their hand to. And that's why I think there, again, back to that word opportunity, the opportunity we have is so great. So great, because diversity of play, diversity of thought, diversity of people, of population, it can only lead to greatness, and driving the game forward in different ways. So that's what drew me to it, and then that's what I ended up being an advocate for the whole way through. So literally from the age of 14, 15, I'd be on panels with the captain of the Leicester Tigers, the captain of the Leicester Riders, Leicester Cricket, having to be the face and the voice of my club. And that continued throughout my career, and it's a big burden. It's a privilege, but it's also a burden. And I have to acknowledge my privilege in the path that I've had with hockey, because it's taken me from my working class state school roots into a space that I didn't even know existed. In terms of the class system, I've learned everything I know now moving in the corporate sector. I learned it all from hockey. I learned what the rules are. I learned the systemic racism. I understand perception, and I'm a marketeer, and so I know how to work things. And that's the reason I took a step away from the game, is because I was so tired of like having to be perfect all the time.
And when you say you had to be perfect,
yeah,
how did you feel you had to be that way?
Because of the pressure, because hockey is subjective as a sport, and a big thing to drive change is representation. If you can't see it, you can't be it. As Kate was saying, like you're so focused on getting yourself selected, getting yourself on the team. Like I needed to do that because I was one of the first. There's only 4 women of colour that have ever played for Great Britain. Like I wanted to be the first. I wanted to keep breaking glass ceilings. I wanted to do it not for me, because it was to make every step I'd done make it easier for the next person coming along. And the amount of players, that young players coming through that have said, I really looked up to you because you always played with a smile on your face. You made me think that I could do that, and like that's a really big deal. So that was where that perfectionist came from, because like I needed to be there, and the only way to be there in that system, there was a high level of conformity, because I was very different. I was different in how I saw the game. I was different in how I played the game. I was so grateful to be there. Like anyone that knows me, I'm happy. Like I'm literally buzzing to be on a hockey pitch. Like now I've gone back to St Albans Hockey Club. I think they honestly, people get annoyed with me because I'm just so happy for the 2 hours I get to play. because I feel privileged and I feel fortunate, and I want to give that joy and that opportunity to other people. But when you're playing and you're in the system, it's a lot to carry, a big load to carry. So Reese and Emily, who were on your webinar last week, I watched and I remember thinking, like, I'm so proud of them for taking a step forward, but I'm also super aware of how hard it is when, you know, they also need to get selected for the teams. They also need to be performing every single day. But that's the big message I would say, is when you're in a minority and when you're an ally of a minority, you're playing for more than just yourself. You're more than. So imagine if everyone stepped onto the pitch thinking, I've got to be more than, because I've got to support other people and I've got to shift things forward and make a change. We would be able to move mountains. But then also on the flip side, if I only ever had to worry about just playing well, like, life would have been a lot easier. You know, instead of worrying about, am I going to get abused from the sideline? Is the ref going to think I'm aggressive? Is, you know, my reaction to this going to be perceived in a certain way? You know.
And were they real concerns that you had? For example, the abuse on the sideline, or the umpire thinking that you're going to be overly aggressive in your play? Were there examples where that happened?
Yeah, there's quite a few. There's quite a few clubs that I can name in more regional spaces that I just remember being really grateful when I could hear my dad's car turn into the pitch, because I thought, oh, at least my dad will be there, because there was less likely to be as many comments, or I would at least have a support there. There was umpires there's coaching staff that would constantly say, are you trying to play the race card? What are you trying to imply? And I'd be like, I'm not trying to imply anything. I'm just, you know, asking about your decision here, or your selection. And I was always super factual. You can only be really factual, I think, in these settings, in a subjective area, because you don't ever want, I actually didn't want to hear that the reason I wasn't being picked, or the reason that you were giving me a card, was because of the color of my skin. You know, I actually would, I like to think that people are better than that. I like to think that you know, I genuinely used to believe that, and I'll ruin everyone's experience of perception of the Olympics. Like, I genuinely used to think that the Olympics was about the best athletes in the world, and it was talent. It was pure talent. It didn't matter where you came from. That's what it really drove me every day, because it didn't matter your life experience, whether you had one parent, two parents, whatever. You had the opportunity. If you had the talent and the work rate and the will, you could make it. And as I got further in the system, I realized, actually, the school you went to is super important. Does your dad play golf with the performance director? That's pretty important. There's, like, you know, there's all of these different factors that I just had no understanding of. And then at that moment, when I had the almost like realization, that's when I thought, right, I can only control what I can control, and I still need to believe in talent and be the best version that I can be. Because as soon as you get suckered into those
Politics,
you know, it actually detracts from you, and actually that's what people want, and that's not the point. The point is, we should have the best players on the pitch, and in order to have the best players on the pitch, and the best players in the boardroom, and the best players and the best people back of house running the sport, we need to be open to diverse thinking, and we need to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table, and then we have a voice, and then we pick and we move with the majority and with the best intentions.
And the point is that you shouldn't have to worry about the politics. Nobody advertises hockey and says, by the way, you know, you need to be able to play golf at a fancy golf club as well, and your dad needs to work in this profession, and you need to go to this particular school, and you need to be able to talk like this, present yourself. It's all, hockey's presented as a sport for all, but what you're saying is it's not, because of what actually happens in the dynamics of trying to make an Olympic squad.
Yeah, and I think that's very much so at an elite level. And I think lower down is that, you know, the cost of entry is super high. Like, I now have a daughter, she's going to be 5 soon. The cost of sport is high. Ballet lessons, swimming lessons, like, it all adds up. And we've just had a global pandemic, which has proven that health is your only wealth. And I'd love to see, as really kind of take a big step back and be like, how do we help people to move? How do we get them into sport? How do we give people opportunity, and not make money a barrier? Because then you allow talent, desire, hard work to come to the fore. And yeah, I hope there is change in that sector, because unfortunately you need money, you know.
And there's a question that's come in, and I'll you know, it's about your identity as a person as well. Did you feel that you lost a bit of that, or were forced to try and, or they were trying to mold you into something else that you weren't, if that makes sense?
I think anyone that knows me knows I've got quite a strong sense of self. I'm very self-aware. I'm very reflective as a person. I knew there was a level of conformity, and there was, you know, I knew if I wanted to be selected, I should have moved to Reading. I should have had a boyfriend that played hockey. I should have, like, I lived in a certain place. There's literally so many criteria that you could have ticked the box. And I was like, no, I'm a Leicester girl. I love the way the coach coaches. I love my teammates. Like, I'm gonna, on the weekends, I'm not gonna hang out with hockey people. I'm gonna go and have my life. I'm gonna work. I worked alongside my sport because I wanted to secure a career afterwards, because I knew that was important to me. And so I was confident and comfortable in those decisions. So me, like, not going to an Olympics, I was okay with that, because I felt if I'd have fully conformed, I'd have lost myself. And I knew, I knew my heart of heart, I knew I would have lost myself for something that wouldn't have paid off. Whereas, you know, I was the best I possibly could be. I was more than good enough. I was one of the top 30 players in the country, and it was someone's decision. And that's what they said. It's not on your stats. It's not on your ability. It's not on your performance. It's just my decision. And I was like, okay, I can't really deal with that. I don't think that's a solid factual reason, but I understand. And I'm like, okay, I did all I could do. And I think that's what really helped me. When you take the restrictions away, like you remove yourself from the system, and you're like, okay, these are the rules that I'm working towards. And my rules are, I'm going to try and be the best I can be. And I would do everything in my power to do that. And if it works, amazing. And if it doesn't, like, I've done my best. And yes, it could be the system that contributed. Yes, it could be I wasn't good enough. I don't know. Like, but I know that I did my best. And I also know that other girls and everyone in the squad was running their own race. It was, I just knew that my race was slightly different. But like Kate said, I didn't have anyone to talk to about that, or anyone. And if it was a fight, it was a lone fight, which is why, as awful as the Black Lives Movement was last year, and as difficult as it was, because it opens old wounds, it was a great opportunity for me to have conversations with my teammates, and for them to listen, and for us to debate, and for them to be like, you know, I never thought you ever experienced racism. And you'd be like, guys, what was my nickname in the indoor finals? What was on my shirt when I scored the flick? Token. Like, that's racism. That's like, and it's no, there was no malice. There's certain things, it's no malice. It's just it's a blindness, and it's an ignorance, unfortunately, that, you know,
It's
existed.
part of the banter.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
You know, I mean, how did it make you feel? Not just that particular incident, but going through all of this, feeling that you couldn't really talk to anyone who would be able to understand you, you weren't able to talk to anyone who would listen.
It was yeah, it was difficult, because you also don't want to get in a position where it's a bit like he said, she said, or because it is so subjective, and you have to be like 100% factual if you're going to make any level of claim, or any level of, you know, if you're going to open a can of worms. And I think it was, like I said to you guys, I was very open last night. Like, I felt anxious talking so openly and so frankly about it, because the reason I stepped away from the sport is because I found it quite difficult, because it's something that's so personal. And equally, I'm very optimistic as a person. I'm super positive. I know how to positively spin things to work to my advantage. I know how to find the path of least resistance as well. But like I say, I keep going back to that word opportunity. We have an opportunity now to learn, to reflect, to learn, and to take action and to positively move forward. Because coming back to hockey now, I love it. Like St Albans is super inclusive. I coach the Flyers on their Sunday sessions when I'm free, and like everyone it's a proper hockey family, and I would love my daughter to experience that. I would absolutely love it. And so I think we have the opportunity to really like maximize the potential of the sport and take learnings from the past and not dwell in the past. That's definitely what I want to do. I want to find solutions. Like, how do we help get more access into sport? I played with a stick that cost £1 for a year before my parents would let me pick a stick because they wanted to know I was committed. Like, what schemes can we do? Can we recycle sticks? Can we connect clubs with primary schools? Like, what opportunities do we have as a hockey family to increase the diversity and inclusion and the participation of the sport?
Kate, how does it make you feel listening back to some of the stories that Kerry just mentioned, knowing that you were there at that time as well? And obviously you were oblivious because you, like you said, you were in your lane. I mean, you had one goal in mind, I guess, which was Olympic gold. So how does that make you feel now looking back?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, you know. And the first time I had any conversation like this at all with Kerry was last summer, and I'm ashamed about that, and I let Kerry down in that way. And you know, I you know, really, you know, I pride myself on feeling like I could connect to everybody as a captain, as a leader in that team, and I failed Kerry in that way. I failed her as a captain. I failed her as a teammate. I failed her as a friend, and I think what it has done is kind of galvanize me and light a fire in me that wants to make sure I do something about that. And as Kerry said, to learn from my mistakes, to learn from my blissful ignorance, particularly with regards racism, and to use the platform that I do have in a really positive way to make sure that our sport is open and accessible to everybody.
And how would you like to see that happen?
I think so many things get mentioned. I think it's all the things. I love your strategy. I think that's also something that, because it is about taking meaningful actions that are about making sure that we are at every level of the sport, from bottom to top and top to bottom, listening to, open to, understanding of, and gaining that lived experience from different people. And so we can then start to, because as Kerry said, the hockey family is tremendous, so passionate, has got so much energy, but I think is predominantly at the moment very white, middle class, able-bodied, cisgendered, and are in their own lanes. And it is, if we can open up those minds and open up that curiosity and think about the opportunity, I think I love that as a way of thinking about it. The opportunity here is tremendous. Like, wow, what I do for my work is about having diverse teams, trying to get teams to open up to diversity, because only by having that diversity of experience, thought, point of view, and actively listening to it and acting on it, can we fully thrive properly and succeed beyond what we think our capabilities are. So it is about, at board level, do we see what we are actually representing? If we are a nation where hockey matters, which is a lovely strapline, we have to think about everybody in the nation, everybody. And I think it's about mentoring for youngsters. It's about anti-bias training is not the solution in and of itself, but I think just having that educational piece around what are some of the negative racist tropes, ableist stereotypes, sexist dynamics that we can be conscious of and aware of, and have a bit of check and challenge through the system. And I think, you know, kind of questions that I put on Twitter last week was, you know, who are we designing systems for and with, and who are we designing them without? And I think those kind of questions, if you go with facts, as Kerry said, go with facts, they will lead us in the right direction.
And Kerry, you talked about St Albans as a club being really inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that's so inclusive about it, and what other clubs could learn from them?
I think the fact is that it does offer hockey for everybody. So, you know, as young as like under 8s to the over 65s with the Boadiceas. Then they've got the Flyers club, and everyone on the coaching staff, they're trying to integrate within the club. And it's like, how do we all work together? Like, it was the first time I remember pulling up for the first session, and like Dillit, the head of hockey, you know, it's Caribbean. I'm like, oh my gosh, wow. Like, I never, you know, and then there's like so many different girls from like the state schools, the private schools. Like, it just felt really welcoming. They've got barbecues. They're like, everyone there is part of the club, and you get your uniform, you feel really part of it. Like, I took Vivian, my daughter, down for the first session, and everyone was like really welcoming to her, and it just felt like acceptable. Whereas it's the first time when I was walking towards it with my bag on my back, I thought this could be really threatening as a situation to join this hockey club. It felt like there was thousands of people there, but immediately everyone's saying hello. Everyone is, I don't know, just really, really positive. And then when we obviously went into the pandemic and we've had to be really COVID secure, and people are just being very supportive of each other. I mean, everything's done on an app now, which makes you feel like a proper grandma. Like, there's just like the communication in the club is not like it used to be. It's just, there's just so many ways to make inclusivity possible now. And telling, like, we talk about telling stories. You don't always need to tell stories about athletes, because if we look at our elite teams now, there isn't any diversity within the teams, or there's very little. You could tell stories about, you know, one of the mums who volunteers and washes the kit.
Yeah.
Like, you could tell stories about someone who's doing coaching for the juniors. Like, we need to kind of expand our narrative big time. And I think the fact that it is based at a school, so they've got relationships at the college, at the sports college, so that also brings people through. They've got relationships at lots of connections with local schools. It's just constantly feeding the club. And that was the thing that we didn't have. At Leicester, it was a women's only. It's men's and women's now, but it used to be just women's only. It was based at the grammar school, and it was very limited. Your intake is limited, whereas it feels like it's giving itself the best chance to invite people in. And I think that's all clubs can do. Is like, have you tried to cover every single base? Not everyone's going to want to play hockey. We have to be honest with ourselves. It's not going to be for everybody. But if you set yourselves up to give everyone the chance, then you're going to increase your talent pool.
Definitely.
One thing you said last night, Kez, which I thought was really, really good, was that hockey's expensive. I think you said like how much it would be for like a family of 4 to join. Yeah. I think that's probably across the board in the whole country. But that at St Albans, you feel that it would be easy to have a conversation about that, if that is challenging, and I think that's really important.
And especially, I spoke with Sport 101, the coaching team this week, and they said the same. They've got people, especially since the pandemic, people have lost jobs, people are, you know, it's affected people's lives, but they've got really talented kids, and they're having a conversation with the coaching, and they can't offer it out. They can't say free hockey for everybody, but they can help people that are interested. Because I'm also aware that if you offer free things, sometimes you're just a childcare service. I know that I ran many a hockey camp where kids did not care about hockey. I was basically babysitting them and they didn't want to be there. So I think there is a balance to be struck. I think having open days, like maybe once a month, where it's it's a free trial. The sticks available, you can see if you like it, and you kind of lure people in and give them the opportunity to fall in love with the sport.
And I think one of the things that you mentioned to me before was about some of the players who had to go out and do coaching at a certain number of coaching sessions outside of their normal club. I mean, do you want to speak to that and how that would normally happen and what could happen going forward?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if again, I'm an old lady, I've retired now, but I don't know if it's changed. But when I was in the squad, as part of the funding from UK Sport, the GB squads, men and women, would do, I think it was a minimum of 5 school visits. And, you know, I'd love to know the stats, the facts of what schools we were going into, because I feel like the majority of schools that knew that was a possibility and knew that was an option were the private schools. And so we were just continually feeding the system. We should have been going to no private schools, to be honest, and we should have been going to schools that don't currently play hockey, that don't have access to hockey pitches or hockey sticks, and just introducing our sport to new people from diverse backgrounds and giving them that chance to meet a GB international player and say, oh, you know, this looks like a really fun sport. I'd love to have a go at that. How can I do that? And that's how you link them in that way. So I don't know if it's changed, but I think if that hasn't changed, I think that's something that could be easily changed and put into place straight away.
I'm just trying to look through some of the comments and that we've got as well. I mean, how do we get more state children involved, particularly when hockey is not played at that school and no PE teachers play hockey? I think some of the things that Reese and Emily are doing is a great example. Hockey in the city, where they're just using any pitch. It doesn't have to be a fancy AstroTurf or a water base or anything like that. It can just be some tarmac, get some sticks. I mean, Simon from Decathlon's putting together a great initiative to do a stick amnesty, where they're going to sort out the logistics of getting sticks together and then distributing them. So there's loads of ways that we can do it. It's just a matter of being creative and thinking outside the box.
Yeah, I think there's connecting forces as well. So I used to be an athlete mentor for the Youth Sport Trust, and we used to go into schools and you'd visit. It was all inner city schools, and you'd do 3 visits throughout the year. So you'd go, you'd tell your story on the first visit. The second visit, you do like a physical session with them. So we would play hockey, whether it was in the sports hall or on the concrete pitch. And then the third session, you'd review your time with them, and they would like pledge and set their own goals. And it just made such a big difference to these young people who had never even met an athlete. They didn't understand that the people that they saw on the TV or that played sport had come from the same places as them. And even if you didn't, like, I remember some of my teammates that were on the same course, like, you still have to say your truth, or just acknowledge your privilege, and that's a positive. But it's still the hard work, the effort still applies. So I think it's finding, you know, other organizations like the Youth Sport Trust, like working with the school systems and trying to connect what's happening within the area. It might not all have to center through a hockey club. It might have to be like multiple bodies within an area, then work together. Because I think that's the problem at the moment. It's too fragmented. We talk about the hockey family, and actually we're not connected at all. England hockey and the clubs, there's not a set way of working, and actually that's what we need to do. We need to, everyone like leaves their egos at the door and be like, the only objective, the vision is to get more people playing the sport, and who's in, what can we do, and then we draw the plan from there. Not what's going to suit each individual objective. It's just you wipe the slate clean, because it's not something that one body can do. Everyone needs to do their own bit.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I was just even thinking about, you know, not being aware of and conscious of, if you're coaching in the system, being aware of and conscious of what challenges and what barriers and obstacles have been in the way, and treat each individual child or person as an individual person, and take those things into consideration. Don't even out the playing field, because it's not even. And actually, you know, if you think about a coach, okay, well, that kid's been to that school and they've got these facilities and that coach, and you've got this kid who's played on concrete, has you know, had a couple of sessions here and there. You know, where's the potential? Are we able to say, okay, you know, I mean, this child who's had these barriers put in their place has got this ability now. What can be?
Yeah.
You know, what can we do here? And that's the exciting thing, that it's totally untapped potential that we've got, and we've kind of cut ourselves off to. So again, it's being aware of it and conscious of it, and being open to that bias that we all have in some way.
But I think that's it. You don't know what the barriers are until you get different people in a room. Because for you, my barriers may be different to yours.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, we all have different things that are preventing us from being the best version of ourselves. Yeah. And then it's finding the commonalities, not the differences, that will help. You know, if we make, you know, if we provide sticks at every session, that's going to help, you know,
yeah,
lots of people. If we, you know, reduce the fees, or if we connect with state schools and the private schools, like, yeah, it's what are the commonalities that can help, that can benefit everybody, not just one section of society.
Yeah.
And what message would you both give to the governing body, if you could give one or two key points that you'd like to? I mean, I'm sure both of you probably have.
Yeah, I think for me, like, there's 4 points that I have them on my screen here because I didn't want to not say them, but like I genuinely feel like there's some shifts that need to happen. And I think the first one for me is that we do need to go from a sport that's colorblind to being color brave. So we just don't acknowledge where we're at the moment, and I think we do need to do that. It's not a good or a bad thing. It's just like, okay, what are the stats now? Like, where are we at in terms of participation breakdown, demographics, and like, let's check in a year, we should be moving further forward. You know, actually acknowledge where we're at, because I don't think we have that information, if I'm honest.
To that point, you know, that for me is like a really powerful point, because, you know, it's something that I've tried to get across, and sometimes it's a struggle, because you kind of feel like you're holding back a little bit, because you almost feel the defensiveness as soon as you start talking about it. You know, I've talked to people who are very senior in the game, and as soon as you talk about anything to do with race, it's like, well, you know, we've done this for this section of society, we've done this for that section of society, and it almost becomes another battle. And when you step back thinking, maybe you should pull back a little bit from that conversation, when that is, you know, it's the reason, you know, I'd say that you're talking here, and it's probably the reason I'm talking here as well tonight.
Definitely, because it's just an acknowledgement, and it's not nobody's fault. It's the system. There's a system. It's systemic, and it needs to change. So it's just that first piece of acknowledgement, and then for me, it's not just championing the elitism of the sport. It's actually it's telling, shining a light on the diverse stories that we have, because I think that's a big problem. If we just focus on the central program, if we just focus on the winning medals, then you're just narrowing your narrative, and you're alienating people, because they're going to look and be like, I can't ever achieve that, because there's no one there that looks like me. You know, when I sat down with the GB girls, the first question I asked them was, I was like, I don't know everybody fully. Can you tell me, like, what club you play at, what position you play? And I think I said, I didn't ask them what uni they played at, but basically, of the squad, there was only like 3 different clubs or 3 different universities. And like, see how narrow, like, even if you don't realize it, that's such a narrow pool. And I'm sure all of those girls would have made their choices based on what was going to give them the best chance of succeeding. And so then that's what pulls everyone to those areas. So I think if we start telling broader stories and giving more people opportunity, then it will feel like the sport's for everybody. And then this is more of a personal, it's like the last point I will make on it, is that I think we should move from like individual player goals to a team that can act with purpose, both on and off the pitch. And that's not just at the top level of the game, that's at every level. Like, it's a conversation I have with my teammates all the time. They get so frustrated because they're only playing in their own game, and I'm like, I've always had to be more than. I need you to think outside and bigger. How are you going to help the team? How do you understand the bigger picture? How do we all work together? And that, I think that's really important, because we can't make change if we're all doing our own individual thing. We have to do it together.
Yeah, I think to kind of follow on from that point, Kerry, I think Wendy might have just put it on the chat, I'm not sure, but I think it's something along the lines of, we call ourselves the hockey family. What family do we want to belong to? And does everybody belong in this family? And so, to what impact can I have outside of my world on the wider world? What impact can I have on society by being conscious of my bias, aware of my privilege, understanding of discrimination and other people's life experience, and do what you can to, you talked about the 3 A's, Gurm, can I acknowledge it? Am I able to assess it, and can I act upon it? I think that's a really nice thing for people to just consider it outside, just that opening up of experience, and listen to different people, read different books, follow different people on social media, get that varied experience, and start asking questions about the clubs that we belong to, the towns, the places that we live in, and how can we make this family more representative and more inclusive for everybody. I think that's a really good thing that we can all do. And then I think for me, and I think it kind of links in with your strategy, Go Measure, Hockey All In, is from that governing body level and above that. And we talked again last night around also the funding bodies and the other stakeholders here that have ultimately power, and kind of sometimes force sports to tick certain boxes and make quick fixes and make everything look really good on the surface. And for those people to make sure that at every part of that system there is diversity, that there is difference of experience, that there is across the board people that are able to input into really meaningful conversations and check and challenge around, again, are we serving everybody in our nation? Can we be honest about that? And it's going to be uncomfortable, but it's time. It's time we got comfortable with that discomfort. Frankly, it's the very least we can do. So I think that's, for me, where it has to. It's that top end. What needs to happen there? And I think I don't think that's a difficult thing to shift, frankly. And then I think it's then everybody else can then do their own bit in that way.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, and it's been quite emotional actually listening to some of the stories, and not just yours, Kerry, but also just people who haven't spoken out, because there are other players who've been through this, and from all parts of society and all walks of life, and just to hear you come out and talk about it, I think it's incredibly brave, and it says a lot about you as a person as well. And also Kate, just listening to some of the stories that you've told, because it's not like you've been immune to any of this yourself, in terms of when it comes to any sort of discrimination or feeling like that. And I think for me, I just really hope that it's not just about people hearing. I hope they actually listen. And one of the things we're not very good at doing, not just in the hockey world, but in society generally nowadays, is just having conversations with each other.
Yeah.
And like real conversations, and taking time to actually listen to one another.
But that's it. Like when I told you the story yesterday when we were discussing it, in the summer when we had Black Lives Matters, I think I was the only person of colour in lots of people's lives, and I was having to have conversations within my work with GMs, with VPs. I was having to have it in a hockey level with my friends, and we got to the end of the week, and we had a Sunday night quiz with all of the old Leicester girls, and I just cried, just cried at this quiz because I was so drained by everything. And we had a really open conversation. And from that conversation, one girl wrote a blog. One girl, three girls went into their hockey clubs and their schools, and they asked questions around like diversity and inclusion and what was the strategy, and really like acted on change. And they kept coming back to me. They kept saying like, what do you think about this? What, you know, they realized they wanted to affect their world. And it was such an amazing thing. And that's why I kind of hope, that's why when Kate spoke to me, I was like, okay, I will speak, because I saw them acknowledge the situation. I saw them act and make a difference in a short window. And I feel like if everyone can do something small, it's just going to make life easier. And then we think about our daughters and our daughters' daughters and sons, obviously, as well, not just the girls. It's just because she's my girl. Making life a little bit easier, and making the sport something that they can escape to and they can enjoy, and they can feel their happy, authentic selves, no matter what that is. I think that's the most important thing.
And there's just one comment that's just come through, and it says, from a governing body perspective, what is a reasonable starting point? And it goes back to what Kerry said, just acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Not say, we understand that certain people feel like outsiders. It's acknowledge that there's a problem. That's where it all starts, and that's a very reasonable starting point.
Yeah. And then commit. It doesn't even have to be that difficult. It's like every year we will have a check-in, and if things aren't changing, we will then hold ourselves accountable. There has to be an accountability on this, and it can't be just on the shoulders of the minorities, because it's too much of a heavy lift. It has to be, you know, the people at the top making the decisions, opening themselves up. And like Kate said, it will be uncomfortable. It's incredibly uncomfortable. But greatness comes from that, you know.
It's not as uncomfortable as it is to be marginalised or discriminated or.
Yeah, and the fact is, you get numb to it. You just accept it, and actually, you shouldn't have to. I walked away from a game I loved because I was so tired, and I didn't want to have to deal with it anymore. And going back, I was like, I'm never going to let anyone take it away from me. I mean, if I pull a hamstring or get injured, fine, on my own bad, but I'm not going to let anyone else, you know, remove me from the game that I love.
Definitely. And I think just to wrap it up, thank you so much for tonight. I'm acknowledging the fact that it's nearly 9 o'clock and it's Friday evening. So thank you guys so much. And just a shout out to Tom. He said he met Kate in Amsterdam with my Flyers team, learnt loads, Flyers disability player. And just thank you again to everyone who's supported so far. And look forward to more of you signing up to the All In mission on the website. And just feel free to tweet in any more questions or comments. So thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.